Hi, good morning all. We are going to start, but before starting, I would like to give some housekeeping instructions. This session is going to be recorded. Therefore, if you can take the floor during the Q&A session. However, if you do that, you should know that you will be recorded. Otherwise, you can also use the chat to ask any questions you have. If you want to take the floor, you should raise your hand and we will unmute you. And without further ado, I would like to give the floor to Sofia Daguiar, Executive Officer of EELISA Alliance.
Thank you so much, Isabel. Good morning to all. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us this morning for this workshop on gender dimension research. This workshop was organized under the EELISA Gender Work Group that is held within the European Universities Initiatives and also our twin project that aims to focus our common research and innovation strategy with our twin project financed by Horizon 2020. It is really a pleasure for me to be here today and see 94 participants together with us. If you are here today this morning, it means in a way that you are a researcher, educator, a staff member, interested in finding more or learn how the dimensions such as gender can affect your work and research. It also means that you are a curious and committed person and willing to meet and exchange with other people's experiences, opinions, and best practices. So in brief, you could also be what we call an EELISA game changer. For us, EELISA European University, it is also a chance to share with you what we call the EELISA journey, a journey of 9 European universities that are determined to transform European higher education to help society find smart and sustainable solutions to global challenges. All of this, of course, with the precious cooperation and co-creation of faculty, students, staff, external stakeholders, and of course, game changers, people that have the willingness to act together to change things. EELISA believes that higher education has a fundamental role in building a more sustainable, fair, equitable society. So for this reason, it is our aim in our work to promote an accessible and diverse university where each and every person, regardless their culture, ethnicity, gender, or beliefs, can find a place to study, research, educate, grow, and contribute actively to the construction of this society. So today's workshop, along with the EELISA Inclusiveness Forum that will also take place tomorrow at 10 a.m. also, are really important steps for us to achieve this goal. So I'd like to thank you particularly all the speakers for their willingness and generosity to come here today and share their expertises and experiences with us. And of course, all the participants, 103 at this moment, to share this workshop with us. It's really important. And of course, the organizational team, led by Isabel Salgueiro, and also Laura Diedling, that were able with the work group to put this workshop, make it happen. Before leaving the baton again to Isabel, our moderator for this morning, I would just like to remind you there are many ways to get involved with EELISA and to take part of this journey with us. You can join EELISA communities, EELISA activities, to the website, subscribe to the newsletter, and to learn more about what we are doing. And of course, you can contact us and the teams to take part of the projects and all the initiatives that we want to organize. So I will not take you more time. I would like to thank everyone again and wish you a really fruitful workshop this morning. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Sophia. As you saw on the agenda is kind of structured in 2 parts. We'll have a first part with with Inés Sánchez de Madariaga and Athanasia Mungov, and we'll have a Q&A session after their two presentations, and then we'll have some presentations on case studies and particular aspects of the gender dimension of research, and we'll have a panel discussion. And so I would like to welcome and give the floor to our first speaker, Inés Sánchez de Madariaga. She's a professor of urban planning at Universidad Politécnica de Madrid, and she's UNESCO chair on gender equality politics in STEAM, in science, technology, and innovation. Thank you very much for participating, Inés.
Thank you so much, Isabel, and Sophia, and Athanasia, and everyone for inviting me. I'm very happy to be here. Let me see if I can share my screen with you. Are you seeing it? Maybe not. Let me see if I'm doing it correctly. Can you see it now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. So I'm going to provide an overview of what we are talking about when we talk about gender in research and innovation. You know that when we talk about gender in research and innovation policy, there are two key dimensions. One of them is the participation of women in the overall science and innovation system, which involves addressing equal opportunities of participation and also structural change of institutions, including gender equality plans. That's one part of the picture, but the other part of the picture, which is what we're going to be looking at today in this workshop, is how to address gender dimensions into the content of research and innovation, and also of engineering. EELISA is a project that addresses engineering mostly, so we are particularly keen at looking at how sex and gender are important dimensions of any field of human knowledge and of human endeavor in professional and educational and research settings. So what does this imply? I'm going to talk about this in a very specific way by explaining to you a key output by the European Commission that was devised as an instrument or a tool to help researchers and practitioners on how to address gender dimensions when preparing research projects for the European Commission's calls during the Research Framework Program Horizon 2020 and also after that. The European Commission included from the very beginning, when it started addressing gender into its science and technology programs, it started to address this aspect of it, not just participation, but also the gender dimensions. That was about 15 years ago that they started. And one of their key contributions was to fund this project in which I was a co-director. I was privileged to be a very active part in developing this project that was directed by Londa Schivingen from the University of Stanford, and in which key experts from across Europe and also other continents participated with their expertise and their knowledge. Many of them were pioneering projects that address gender dimensions for the first time in their fields of knowledge. So the Gender Innovations is a tool that the European Commission is using to support researchers and decision makers in integrating gender dimensions into research and innovation processes. This is how the website of the project has two parts. One is the website, which is what I'm showing you, and it also has a publication, or I would say two publications, because the project had two parts. It appeared first, the first edition in 2013, and the second edition in 2020. So there are two books, PDF, that you can download from the European Commission's website. But the platform of the project is what you're seeing here. So this is a tool for all researchers who want to respond to the question that the European Commission has included into their call for proposals on how is your project addressing any relevant gender dimensions that should be addressed. It looks like this. The project has as illustrations a number of case studies in these areas that you see, environment, engineering, health and medicine, science, you see here that this is addressing mostly scientific and technological and health areas. It's not addressing social or humanity areas in which gender has been for a long time a well-settled field of study. That's why this project is not addressing those human sciences and humanities areas, but it's addressing those more scientific and technological areas in which gender is a newer thing. So it's organized in these four big broad fields of knowledge and practice, and it has a number of case studies for each of them. You see here the list of case studies, for instance, in health and medicine, in engineering, and in environment. So the case studies are complemented by these more cross ways of looking at the problem, which are the methods. What kind of methods can you apply to make sure that you're looking at the sex and gender dimensions in your project? And there are, this is organized by general methods that are relevant to all areas of knowledge, but then more specific methods that are specifically addressing specific aspects, for instance, of evolutionary biology or machine learning or impact assessments or health and biomedicine. So you see, those are more tuned methods that are specifically addressing specific dimensions of one particular area of knowledge. And then a number of checklists that allow the researcher to make sure that all the key aspects that should be considered are included. So, and then you see that the website has additional complementary things that looking at intersectional design. You know that gender and sex also interact with other dimensions like race or age or socioeconomic status. So how to look at those intersections is also addressed in the website. And then there are other things like policy recommendations that is more designed for policymakers and decision makers rather than designers. So let me show you how in more detail. For instance, let me show you one case study that I was responsible for, which is the case study on mobility. The case studies are organized in this way. There's an abstract that describes what is the challenge, what are the methods that are applied, what are the gendered innovations, because there's one presupposition to this project, which is that looking at gender and sex dimensions improves the quality of research. This is the approach of the European Commission in its framework program. It's that looking at sex and gender improves the validity and the relevance and the impact of research and innovation, because it will address better the different needs of users, and it will look better at the reality of the diversity of human experience. So it improves the quality and the excellence of research. That's why it's considered as an element for the evaluation in the quality of projects. And that's why we talk of gendered innovations, because we are innovating, we are bringing up new aspects of how to look at reality, and we are in particular in innovation, we are opening up areas of innovative, for instance, industrial development or innovative ways of looking at cities or transportation. So each of the case studies explains what are the gendered innovations that are an output of looking at sex and gender dimensions. And then the case study is explained in detail. You see, and for instance, in the case of transportation, there is this innovation that is the result of a research project I did a few years ago, which is the concept of mobility of care, which is looking at what are the patterns of mobility in urban areas that are mostly made by women because they are related to care tasks in the family and in the home and for the care of dependent persons, that statistically it's women who make them, and that transportation statistics do not normally look at because they are hidden under other headings. And so if you are able to count them, you make them visible and are able to quantify them, and then you're also able to look at transportation systems from another different point of view that makes a better account of the diversity of use and needs of transportation in urban areas, and that potentially will change the priorities of transportation policy. So this is one example. And then also regarding methodologies, the participatory methodologies that will include the participation of women will also help supporting this more diverse inclusion of the perspectives and needs of the different population, particularly of women. And this requires a certain number of measures to ensure that women's participation is included into the process of research and also of policy making. So this is an example, and let me of one case study, and then the case studies include, of course, next steps, policy recommendations, and a more wide bibliography that will help researchers to look further and deeper into each of the case studies that the website analyzes. Let me show you this. In this section, the section on terms provides a very basic but very serious and scientific description of what are the key terms to understand what we're talking about when we talk about sex analysis and gender analysis, how sex refers to biological aspects, how gender refers to non-biological aspects, but social and cultural, and what different concepts mean and are actionable in terms of research and innovation, and also with a scientific relevant bibliography for researchers to know more about what these terms that might be misunderstood by some because they are part of common language, and many researchers in technological areas are not really aware of what's the difference between sex and gender, what does it mean, what is the accepted state of the art in the understanding in scientific terms in different areas of in biology or in medicine or in engineering, and also how sex and gender interact, because the biology and the social interact in many aspects, and this is one of the areas in which research has to take into consideration. Also, some problems may arise as sex might be overemphasized or gender might be overemphasized or underemphasized, and how they interact with other dimensions such as age or race. For instance, we know that Asian men are physically smaller than Caucasian men, and so some aspects that relate to gender that have to do with size enter into a gray area when you also look at race in certain projects. So all these issues are analyzed in very serious and sophisticated ways in the project to be a practical and actionable toolkit for researchers and engineers when it comes to understand what can be the sex and gender dimensions on their projects. And then the project also includes these checklists so that you can researchers can look at like a review of, have I really looked at what that might be relevant in my project that might have a sex or gender dimensions, and well, I have considered this, I have not considered that. So it's a practical tool also to help looking at your project and make sure that you are considering the relevant aspects that you should include when you have to respond to the European Commission's question in the drafting of your project. How and in what ways might gender and sex dimensions be relevant to your proposal? So let me maybe show you under methods. You see some key methods, I would say, analyzing sex and analyzing gender. You need to look at what does it mean analyzing gender? Gender are all these aspects in life that are related to the social and cultural tasks and understandings that are attached to persons and to groups because of their sex, but that are sociologically and culturally defined. And you need to look at these dimensions throughout the process of research, from the stage of when you identify the issue, your research question, the problem you are addressing, how you are designing the research, how do you collect the data, how you analyze the data, how you disseminate the results. And so here, the project gives you a number of issues that you need to consider at each of these stages of research to properly understand the gender dimensions in the project. So this is a very brief summary of what the Gendered Innovations Project is, and it's designed so that projects can integrate the gender dimensions. For instance, I will show you in the most classic cases that in medicine, I'm sorry that this doesn't stand, heart disease. This is a very classic example to understand gender differences and sex differences in medicine, and that set in motion already many years ago all the gender analysis in medicine, because the symptoms between men and women are different. So all the protocols were defined differently, and there would be an under diagnosis of women because the protocols were designed for a standard understanding of this disease in men, because it was conceptualized as a male disease. But osteoporosis is the opposite. Osteoporosis was considered as a female disease, and looking at it from a gender perspective, produced the result of understanding that the protocols needed to be changed, particularly as with the longer lives, the lengthening of life expectancy, the increase of deaths in the male population because of osteoporosis was very big because it was underdiagnosed. So you see that gender can also work both ways. Sometimes it's not always to the prejudice of women, but also of men. So in engineering, a very relevant example, one of the earliest examples was the test with the crash dummies that was done mostly with men, and that resulted and the empirical evidence of the impact on pregnant women, but also on the women's body, because women are smaller. So that was also one of the early examples that applied to the engineering and the innovation field, and that made it very obvious that gender analysis produces innovation. So let me finish here. I think I'm done with my time, and I will ask you to look at this project as a resource for that can help you in your work. For the Spanish speakers, you know that it's translated into Spanish, and that you can. It's also translated into many other languages, and you have them here in this slide. And thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Ines. Right on time. We'll jump directly to Athanasia, and then we'll take questions. we have a Q&A session after these two presentations, so I will ask you all to please wait till we finish with this next presentation, and you can also write questions on the chat. And so connecting with what Ines was explaining to you all, we have here Athanasia Mongo. I think that's how it's pronounced now, maybe Mungu, I'm not sure, sorry. And she's policy officer at the DGRTD, working on gender equality policies in research and innovation.
Thank you very much, Isabel, and good morning also to everyone. It's really a pleasure to be with you today. I just shared my screen. Please let me know if you can also see it.
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can see it.
That's great. Thanks a lot. So yes, my name is Athanasia Mougou, and I'm a policy officer at the Director General for Research and Innovation. And I will first give you a brief overview of the policy context that we have on gender equality at the European level. I have to say that also Ines covered so many aspects, so I will also try to just complement the gaps. And yes, also if you have any questions at the end. So just to start, first of all, to tell you that gender equality and gender mainstreaming is one of the priorities of the European research area already since 2012. So we had three objectives that we wanted to address. First of all, it is to have gender equality in scientific careers at all levels, achieving gender balance in decision-making bodies and positions, and very importantly is integrate the gender dimension into research and innovation content. So our policy approach ever since is basically is institutional change. What we wanted to do is to change the system and not only fix the numbers. So we have been supporting under the previous framework programs for research and innovation, FP7 and Horizon 2020, we have been supporting organizations to implement gender equality plans. And this has had a very positive impact over the past years, and it also helped us to make our policy even more ambitious. And I will go into more detail on this in a second. And at the same time, we're also gradually opening up our policies to intersectionality and inclusiveness. So that means that when we talk about intersectionalities, also look a bit beyond gender. For example, other factors that can interact also with gender and can be a ground for discrimination, such as age, race, for example, and so on. I would also like to show you some key statistics before we go into the novelties of Horizon Europe. At DG Research and Innovation, we have our flagship statistical report that is called She Figures, and it monitors gender equality in research and innovation across Europe and beyond. So what we can see after 10 years of policy on gender equality is that we have achieved gender parity at PhD graduate level. For example, you can see here some statistics, but there are still some disparities when it comes to certain fields of study. For example, in engineering, manufacturing, and construction, doctoral graduates, women doctoral graduates, they account for a bit less than 1/3 of the total graduates. And this is also the same when we also look at other fields of study, such as information communication technologies, just above, where, where this number is actually even lower. And when we also look at what is happening at higher academic positions, this is what we call grade A positions. It is the equivalent of full professorships. We can also see that women hold about 26% of these positions. And the same, unfortunately, is also the case when we go into decision-making roles and positions. These numbers are very, very low. And also something that's very important within the context of this webinar is that at EU level, less than 2% of publications have a gender dimension into the research and innovation content. So this has to change. And also, if you're interested in more statistics, you can also have a look at our report, at the She Figures report, where you can also find more information about how your country, for example, is doing in this field. And so what we wanted to do also with Horizon Europe, first of all, gender equality is now a strengthened cross-cutting priority. It is very high also in the Commission's list of priorities. And we have, and we have introduced new provisions at 3 different levels. First of all, gender equality plans are now an eligibility criterion for any organization that is interested in applying for Horizon Europe funding. This also applies to any organization that is based in a European member state or associated country. And also the integration of the gender dimension in research and innovation content is now mandatory by default across the whole program, and is one of the award criteria. And finally, gender balance in research teams is also one of the ranking criteria that evaluators will look at for proposals that have received the same score. So to go a bit into more detail about the integration of the gender dimension in Horizon Europe, it is mandatory by default, as I mentioned, and is evaluated under excellence for research innovation and innovation actions. And is in more detail, it is evaluated under the soundness of the proposed methodology. I will not go into much detail because Ines already covered a lot. What we mean by gender dimension is basically an umbrella term that we use that covers both the integration of sex, biological attributes, and gender. That means social attributes, cultural norms into the whole process of research and innovation. So that means that you need to think about the gender dimension in research innovation content from the time that you set also your research priorities, when you also analyze your data, when you collect your data, even to the time that you will transfer your results into the market. So it is mandatory by default across the whole program, unless it is specifically mentioned that the gender dimension is not relevant. And we also have the Gendered Innovations 2 report that Ines also mentioned, where you can also find several case studies in different scientific fields, ranging from health to even artificial intelligence and robotics, on how the gender dimension is relevant in these fields. So our experts, they have also come up with refined methodologies to further help you about how best to integrate the sex and or gender-based analysis in different fields. So also the policy recommendations, they are fully aligned with the structure of Horizon Europe, and you can also have more ideas about how to even embed an intersectional analysis into your proposal. I have already shared the link into the chat, so I think that the best is basically for you to check all the wealth of information that is gathered in this report. And in Horizon Europe, we also have funding for gender equality. We have different types of funding. First of all, there is funding for gender studies and intersectional research. This is mostly under Cluster 2 for culture, creativity, and inclusive society. But it's not exclusively there, because we also have, in the past, last year, we had, for example, under Cluster 4, a topic about gender bias in artificial intelligence. At the same time, we also provide funding to develop inclusive gender equality policies to support the European research area under the widening participation and strengthening the European research area program part. And at the same time, we also support women innovators under Pillar 3 of the program, the European Innovation Council. For example, we support also women innovators because they are currently underrepresented. Imagine that I will give you some numbers that come also from she figures that the patent applications that come from women at EU level, they are at less than 11%. So this is also very low, and also we can see that women as heads of startups, they only account for about 15%. So this is why we support the women innovators to help a bit having the right support. So we have several also flagship initiatives and several schemes, such as the Women Tech EU scheme that supports women-led deep tech startups, and the European Prize for Women Innovators. So currently, because the work program of 2023 and 2024 hasn't officially adopted, we don't really have any open polls at the moment, but be sure to check the funding and tenders portal where you will find more news later on. Something that we do have open though, and is also is something brand new. Over the summer, we launched a new award for gender equality champions to recognize the academic and research organizations that make change in gender equality. So this is mostly also to help our policy on gender equality plans. So there are already 3 different categories that is applicable for organizations that would like to apply, even when they are at the beginning, at the very first steps, when they set up a gender equality plan, to even when they have more experience. So please also feel free to share this information with your networks, and there is still quite a bit of time to apply for this, a bit more than 1 week. And that would be all, I think, for me. If you are also interested in finding out about what we do about gender equality in research and innovation, you can also visit our policy webpage. There was something here in my presentation, but you can also scan this QR code where you can find more information about what we do for Horizon Europe, about gender equality plans, our latest reports, and much more. And of course, if you have any questions, I'd be very, very happy to try to answer them. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Athanasia. So we will now, we have now the Q&A session. So the floor is yours. You can either raise your hand or use the chat to insert your questions. I think somebody had raised her hand before. Yes, Monique.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. Thank you for this amazing explanation about the project Gender Innovation and also gender mainstreaming strategies. I've seen the report before the gender innovations too, and I was wondering how to make gender mainstreaming strategies applicable in AI policy making. Because, for example, in the examples that they used on the report is basically how we need to train different data sets and how we need more diverse data to be trained and different models. But when we see the AI Act, for example, there is not much talk about gender mainstreaming strategies. And also, I've seen the website shared by the professor, the first speaker, and it also mentions the gender innovation and how it's important. And we all believe, well, we wouldn't be here if we didn't believe on gender equality and we didn't believe that this is important. But how to make this convey the message in a way that really impacts the policy making? Because I feel that there is no dialogue between what's the need in changing regulations and what's being done regarding gender equality and gender mainstreaming strategies. Thank you so much.
When you say AI, you mean what? Sorry. Monique, you said AI? What do you mean by AI?
Artificial intelligence, I guess.
Oh, IA.
Not sure, Monique.
AI, okay, artificial intelligence, okay. Oh, she can't unmute, she says, Monique. She can't unmute. She's muted.
Yeah, you should now, yeah, because I have
artificial intelligence.
Yes, AI, artificial intelligence.
Okay, thank you. Well, I will, maybe I can illustrate this by one project that I'm carrying out now together with this is a research project that I'm working on currently with MIT researchers on transportation. They use artificial intelligence to analyze the data sets coming from the transportation authorities in several cities in the United States. And for instance, how do you get gender into that? Well, first you need to see what are the biases that might be embedded in the data. For instance, the data that they use from the Transportation Authority in Washington, D.C. Doesn't provide information on the sex of the individuals. It only has the names. So they infer the sex of people through the names, running the database using artificial intelligence through different sorts of bases that say this name is female, this name is male. But it's an inference. And so this analysis has a greater bias for Asian populations because Asian names are more difficult to say. Artificial intelligence systems don't identify so readily which Asian names are male or are female. So you see the sort of things that are very methodological on applying artificial intelligence to gender studies using data sets that have certain limitations or conditions or characteristics. And then other gender barriers that have to do with that we are facing in this study. The objective of this study is to quantify different patterns of mobility of men and women in using transit systems through these particular data sets using artificial intelligence. So there are also certain inferences of where the location of the subway stops are in relation to certain land uses. And so you can infer certain patterns by sex related to certain land uses by the location of stops, but also this there are certain margins of, you cannot really say how many of these people. For instance, we found that many more women use subway stops that are close to daycare centers. But then there are people who might be going to that particular stop because there are other things close to these stops that might not be care centers. So this needs to be triangulated by other sorts of evidence, but there's a very significant results of the analysis that demonstrate that there's a correlation between sex and daycare centers by running this gender analysis of the data set using artificial intelligence. I'm just mentioning this as an example of the sort of things that you need to look at when applying artificial intelligence. Another would be here in Spain, the Ministry of Transportation is applying artificial intelligence to a different data set for transport analysis, which comes from cell phones. And so now this has other sorts of limitations when looking at gender. So you need to really apply all the criteria that the gender innovations provides as a toolbox, things you need to look at in your particular case. And there are many more things. It's not just about numbers. There are many other things that you need to look at. For instance, what are the legal limitations or obstacles to having sex included into the transportation cuts that would avoid the problem of having to infer the sex of people by their names. So all those sorts of things are the things that you need to look at and that go far beyond looking at numbers and quantitative data.
If I may also add something to this question, because Monica raised a very good point. Of course, integrating the gender dimension into research content is one thing, and also gender mainstreaming in policies, it's another thing. So what we also wanted to do with Horizon Europe and gender equality plans, for example, is we have some requirements for the gender equality plans, but also one of the recommended areas that should be covered by the gender equality plans content-wise is integrating the gender dimension into the teaching content. So this is also something that the organizations have to take into account, because also when you have a strict policy on gender equality, that is to address the 3 area objectives also that I talked about at the beginning, having gender balance also in decision-making bodies and positions, and integrating at the same time the gender dimension into research and innovation content. I mean, those things, they go hand in hand. So once you have a policy, then also by integrating the gender dimension, the teaching content, this is also what is needed at universities.
Yes, there are some studies that have demonstrated that having more women increases after a certain critical mass of participation of women in decision making, or within the overall number of professionals, increases the possibility or the likelihood that gender issues are taken into account in policy agendas. So there are certain interactions between the participation and the structural change of institutions and the content of what is done by institutions.
Thank you very much, Ines and Athanasia. Angela Perez raised her hand. You should be able to unmute your mic. Yeah. Hi.
Thank you. Hi. Yes, I want to ask something. The topics you discuss raise my curiosity about the intersection of these issues with other proposals from other communities and other types of, let's say, criticisms. For example, people that say that the work weeks should be shorter, for instance. For example, I'm talking about the criticisms to the status quo in many senses. So when we talk about gender, for instance, in research, I am a researcher, I am a mother. I wonder, where are you touching the fundamental structural problems that could be related to excess of productivity, competition, and the demand of increasing those, when we, for instance, as women, would like to hold scientific careers with, for example, part-time availability. And this is not possible. And this is very, this just takes you back and eventually takes you off the fields in which you are. In which aspects are you actually touching these fundamental structural changes that could be taken? I mean, when you talk about representativity in policies, for example, having more women in policies, this doesn't necessarily address these profound issues of many people wanting some structural changes. Many people want to say in science, and it's from my perspective as woman, and we just have no chance to compete, in the sense that we don't want to spend our time in the same way that it's normally or has been normally done as by men. And sometimes we don't need, for example, monetary incentives to send our kids to another carer, but we want to do care work, but at the same time we want to do science. So this is a structural, very deep type of issues, and I wonder if you are addressing this. Thank you very much.
Athanasia, please go ahead.
Thank you very much for this question, Angela. It's true also that intersectionality and the opening up to intersectionality is also something new for us, and also to having inclusive gender equality policies. We are working towards this, and of course, when we talk about intersectionality, we also talk about taking into account the socioeconomic status. I mean, also your we are trying to make progress towards this. And this is something that we will also address with the new European Research Area Policy Agenda that has also some concrete actions until 2024. And we're trying to make progress towards this. Of course, I definitely agree with what you said, in the sense that, yes, we need to have also concrete structural change. If you're interested, I will also share with you a report about how we're trying to have this opening to intersectionality. Also, I have to say that under the European Research Area, the WIDERA work program, we also have, we provide now funding specifically for inclusive gender equality plans to also see how we can go beyond. And we also have several experts that are working into still the outcome of COVID on researchers, because all of this is not fully addressed, and also how we can advance our policy towards inclusiveness. So for all of this, we're working very, very hard, and it's definitely in our priorities. Also having something in place, code of conduct, let's say, for zero gender-based violence also in academia, and having in place concrete measures. I will share with you the new report that I was talking about. I don't know if someone else wants to say something about this question. Ines?
I think that today's workshop is on gender dimension of research, not policies for gender equality. So probably there will be other ELISA workshops addressing this particular issue on gender equality plans and measures to support gender equality in academia. By Isabel and Sofia, maybe you can share some information of upcoming or past ones that might be recorded and that people can look at.
Thank you. Well, on 11th February, we had a roundtable where we discussed largely these issues, where we addressed the issue of gender in research and research careers, and we had different people from ELISA partners with different profiles. So we had as panelists high-level people, but also we had students and people from administration to give us their insights. And then we will think about future activities internally. We organized, we participated together with other alliances in a workshop on gender equality plans. That was not public, that was internal. And we are thinking about organizing that again. That was a peer learning experience where some partners explained how they had developed and the background of their gender equality plans. And then we all are also working on, we have our own gender equality plan that we are updating now with sex disaggregated figures that will give us also the picture of how the situation is at both each partner and also at alliance level.
I would say that, Angela, I don't know if you're Spanish, by your name you could. I would recommend that you have a look at the Spanish science on law on science, national legislation, the one from 2019 and the one that has just been approved, in which there are a number of clauses that address gender equality in academia. And also, you know that by law, the European Commission is incentivizing it very highly with the requirement for to get funding for research programs. But in Spain, it's a legal requirement that universities have a gender equality plan and a gender equality unit. Looking at the different plans that have been set in place by the different universities, many of them are already in their fourth plan. So there's quite a bit of experience in Spain and also across Europe through the program funded by the unit, the gender unit, where Athanasia works. They have been funding these projects for over 10 years now, in which so many institutions have worked, and there's a very rich body of experience across Europe adapted to different contexts in public and private institutions across countries. The early projects of 10 years ago, the more recent ones, which are more participatory oriented, more co-creation and this kind of thing. So there's a lot of experience, lots of toolkits and recommendations and so on. And this rich body of experience is there for researchers and institutions to learn from. I don't know if, Athanasia, if you have made any evaluation of all these projects.
All these projects, indeed, I mean, over the past more than 10 years, so there has been such a wealth of good practices that stemmed from all these projects. For example, already to help the interested participants and organizations that want to apply also for Horizon Europe funding, and we want to help also with setting up gender equality plans. We have come up also with good practices that stemmed from these projects, and all this you can also find in the GEAR tool that we also co-developed with EIGE, specifically on all the steps on setting up gender equality plans. We also have several fact sheets and reports about gender equality plans. I mean, we also base our policy on several fronts. Let's say, after something has run successfully for so many years, there are also some good practices that stemmed from it. Otherwise, we wouldn't have introduced this criteria now. And I will also share with you the GEAR tool, because it also has some good practices. I mean, essentially, it comes from all of our projects.
There's a lot of experience, so there's no need to start from scratch.
No, definitely not. And this is also something that we try to do. Once you also start with a European project, we have also our database of our network of experts. So we are consulting them very, very frequently on this.
Thank you very much. Maybe we can take one more question if somebody wants to take the floor. No. You can also send us your questions by email if you have questions after the workshop. And then it's almost 11. Maybe we can go to the next part of the workshop. And for that, we have as moderator Stefano Palaggi. Hi, Stefano.
Hi. Good morning to everyone.
Hi, good morning. Stefano will be our moderator. He's assistant professor at the Biorobotics Institute of Scuola Superiore Sant'Anna in Pisa, and he's principal investigator of Microscale Robotics Laboratory. I hope I explained that correctly. And as I said, he'll be our moderator today. And we have as panelist Deborah Angeloni, Sofia Paglia, Ali Moldoveanu, I don't know if that's pronounced like that, Ipek Ikarakan, and Eva Gengler. Eva Gengler is a bit, she'll join, she's here. Hi, Eva. And again, housekeeping, our panelists, the idea of this panel discussion is that our panelists that come from different ELISA partner institutions tell us about complete experiences of integrating and taking into account gender and sex when doing research. They will tell us about their experiences, and we will take all questions at the end of this session. And I give the floor to Stefano and to the rest of the speakers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Isabel, and well, welcome again to all of you. Today in this session, we will showcase case studies of how gender and sex dimension influence research, how this dimension have had and has an impact, an important impact in shaping our societies, and we will also analyze the different dimensions of this dimension. So the sex dimension, so sex-related biological facts, and gender dimensions, including gender as a factor intersecting with other factors. We have 5 panelists from 5 EELISA institutions, as Isabella mentioned. And we will start with the first topic, that is the sex dimension in biology and medicine, with Deborah Angeloni. Deborah is an associate professor at Scuola Sant'Anna in Pisa, and she earned her laurea in biology cum laude at the University of Pisa, her PhD in chemotherapy at the University of Milan in Italy, and her postdoctoral training at the National Cancer Institute of NIH in the US. Deborah has a background in cancer biology, and more recently, she developed an interest in space biology because space offers experimental biologists with an unprecedented way to study life. So, Deborah, I'll leave the floor to you, and well, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Stefano. Thank you, Isabel. If you don't mind, I will stop my video because the background is blinking, and I will appear back for the question time. Okay? Can you see my screen?
Not yet. Yeah, now.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so yes, I would like to thank the organizers and my institution for the opportunity to participate in this workshop. It's really enlightening. With my presentation, I will provide an overview on the subject of sex dimension in biology and medicine, as Stefano introduced. I must say that as a cell and molecular biologist, the dimension of sex enters my daily practice because we are well aware that our cell models do have a sex, and this might influence the cell behavior. So just to make an example, we know that a specific stress response mechanism that is called autophagy works better in female cells than males. And so for this reason, we must pay attention to the cell models that we use for specific experimental needs. Now, going to healthcare, we know it is well established now that sex and gender have an enormous impact on healthcare. And in fact, the risk of experiencing a particular disease may go beyond the natural history of the pathology, and may depend on disparities in prevention, in diagnosis, and treatment that are not properly targeted to different sexes or gender. So we must consider that sex has biological features that greatly influence any disease, from the molecular to the epidemiological level, that is from micro scale to macro scale. And these affect the course of the disease and the treatment output. So here you see the globally estimated rate of death or disability deriving from different diseases. You can see that there is a very different distribution among males and females. So if we define sex as a biological entity defined by our chromosomes, 2X in females, X and Y in males, gender indeed is a more difficult entity to describe because it relates to socially constructed identity, to rules, behaviors, and the interaction of the individual with the environment. So belonging to one sex or the other, or to a gender or the other, can have dramatic consequences for the outcome of a disease. And this happens because up to the very recent past, medicine had a strong androcentric connotation. It was male-centered. So for centuries, the female body was considered something of a defective male body, or let's say rather the same thing, but with some peculiarities related to the capacity of bearing a child, basically. So as a consequence of this mindset, clinical studies were performed largely on male individuals or male animal models, and the results generated were simply transferred to females. And this happened up to a very recent past. So to make a very, very long story short, in 1991, Bernadine Haley published a paper in the New England Journal of Medicine, a very authoritative journal in the field, about what she called the Yentel Syndrome. Yentel is a movie character played by Barbara Streisand here, of a woman that, to be able to get an education, pretends to be a man, and as such is treated and considered all through the story. So with this seminal paper in the New England Journal of Medicine highly highlighted the fact that still in the 1980s, much of cardiology research was still focused on male patients, paying less attention to females, basically, and thereby increasing the chance of adverse outcome for women patients. Here you see an example. Men are more prone than women, especially in a certain range of age, to develop acute myocardial infarction. But then women are much more prone to adverse outcome. You can see here. And this happens for a whole plethora of reasons, of course, genetics, biology, sex hormones, and so on. Not least the fact that symptoms were traditionally described in men. Symptoms were those reported by male individuals, and they happen to be different from symptoms reported by females. And also the early diagnostic tests that are applied in the emergency room perform better for men than for women. So when a woman comes to the emergency room, oftentimes she is diagnosed later, much later than a man. Another example is represented by the propensity to develop cancer. Cancer is still a major cause of death today, with an increasing incidence actually worldwide. There are sex-associated differences in cancer incidence, in prognosis, in response to therapy and survival that have been well described in literature. Generally speaking, women have some survival advantage over men, possibly because of the 2 copies of the X chromosomes, which encodes for about 120 small RNA molecules that regulate the immune response, and that 120 against the 4 that are found on the Y chromosome, the male chromosome. So this might explain why women have this slight advantage. However, there are very important differences that must be addressed. For example, in colorectal cancer, which is the 3rd most common cancer in the world, women are more prone to develop the right-sided colon cancer type, which is the most aggressive. Whereas men develop mostly the left type. There are molecular differences among these 2 types, which are very important. For example, women develop mutations of an oncogene, BRAF, that is quite common in this type of cancer, whereas men develop mutations of tumor suppressor P53. Now, this might sound complicated to the non-specialist, but the message is that different sex-specific molecular defects underlie the different clinical manifestations of the disease. And therefore, it is important then that preclinical studies consider animals of both sexes to investigate not only the molecular mechanism, but also, for example, the response to therapy. And at a higher complexity level, the sex issue should be considered in clinical trials. I want to add that the COVID-19 pandemic also brought to evidence a clear difference among men and women in response to the infection in the course of the disease, and the outcome. Now, the reasons are still under investigation. They're still complex and include not only the biological differences that certainly exist, but also possible gender differences like habits, lifestyle, the care of others, and so on. So now in the age of the 4 Ps medicine, which means predictive, preventive, personalized, and participative, it should be possible to develop a personalized approach that encompasses all aspects of personalized care. So now we know that the World Health Organization is paying a lot of attention to sex and gender issues. The European community is supporting a number of actions and projects, as we heard. And there are many journals in the field that are devoted to sex and gender issues. I would like to conclude with the 6 strategic directions that the WHO suggests for its gender strategy. The take-home message is basically that an evidence-based medicine for men and women in the end will benefit all women, men, children, and adolescents. Results that from men are transferred to women plainly, of course, are not evidence-based medicine. There is no time probably to go through this slide, but the strategic directions include gender analysis and planning, national strategies that must be put in place. They put the emphasis on training. It is very important to train our present and next generation of physicians and researchers to change the mindset. And then, a number of policies are under attention to develop gender equality, gender equity, and so on. So I will close here, and I thank you for your attention. I will take questions when they come. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah. And so we will move to the next part of our session, and then we will have a roundtable with question and answer at the end of the session. So with all panelists. So thank you again. And now we move to the next topic of our session, that is gender dimension and intersectionality in engineering. Gender is not the only dimension of an individual. There are different factors that come into play when we research people. For instance, age, mood, health, as well as socio-economic factors, ethnicity. This is what we call intersectionality. And gender should also be taken into account in all phases of research. And our panelists will be telling us about these aspects. So let me then introduce our first panelist of this second topic, that is Sofia Palia, I hope I pronounced it well, who is a PhD student at Budapest University of Technology and Economics. She examines the effect of sports on locomotion and balance. During her research work, experimental design plays a prominent role where consideration of intersectionality is essential. Sophia will now share the experience of some of her previous study design. And so welcome, Sophia, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. I try to share my screen. My roots. Okay, so thank you very much for the invitation to be part of this workshop. So originally I'm graduated as an engineer, and I've collected some aspects related to engineering, basically answer the question what an engineer does. And I'd like to highlight this field, testing, design, and conceptualize. Because I think that's related most of this gender dimension topic. So several types of research study design exist with its strengths and flaws, of course. But what is important, I think that it depends on the research problems. So if we would like to describe our data or characterize our group, we need a descriptive study design. Or if you'd like to test our hypothesis or establish a relation between variables, we need some experimental design, some analytical study. But of course, all kind of study involves distinct research question. And of course, we need a method, some experimental background, some tools to execute our study. And what is important that we certainly need some subject group of participants or a target group where I think it's gender dimensions is very thoroughly involved. So what dimensions we have? Basically, I talk about studies involving human subjects. So first we need anthropometry, for example, the weight or height, or I should write the age as well, because these are very important dimensions in this field. Of course, gender has a very significant aspect of it. And I think there's some study-specific skill for certain research topics, so we should consider. And we call all these criteria as selection or exclusion criteria, which determine our basic target group during our research. And based on my own intuition, I like to highlight three aspects of it, which I think it's important and should taken into account when choosing a target group or a control group in our study. Firstly, I think it's important that these dimensions are preliminarily determined by the nature of the study. So myself, I'm working in an interdisciplinary research group. So in this field, we have experts from very different fields. We are working together with doctors, coaches, and so. So when we consider the measurement setup, I think the most important one is to lead by the nature of the study. For example, this one from 2018, we investigated the effectiveness of treatment. And as you can see in the article, the group involved 18 female subjects and 3 male subjects. And here's a question that is this a representative sample of the group? And I bring some further data of this disease from this year 2018, and if we highlight our age group, we can see that the number of cases in a given cohort suggests that the disease mainly affects women. So as far as I can say that, yes, it is a representative sample for this study. The next one, I also highlighted previously the research question. Previously, we examined the balancing ability of elderly people. And firstly, we would like to analyze the influence of the stances or the leg dominance of balancing ability, and we see that there is a significant difference between these conditions. And then we also analyze the gender dimensions. So we had another research question whether the gender influenced by the balancing ability. And based on the statistics, we saw that yes, gender has also a significant effect on their balancing ability. And finally, I called it external influence in the study design, but I think it can be eliminated by a well-posed research question as well. And as I mentioned, we have a very inhomogeneous research team in a term that we have experts from different fields. So in this study, when we examined the Hungarian folk dancers, we of course cooperate several coaches, and they said that okay, we should analyze different skill levels as a factor, as a dimension, and separate our basic group of participants into smaller groups. But at the end, it turns out that the fatigue appeared for each dancers according their own skill levels. So the effect of training level wasn't taken into consideration, and so we didn't let the external factor influence the study. So altogether, I'd like to stop here and finish with these 3 case studies. And of course, I'd be happy if you have some further questions regarding this topic.
Thank you, Sophia. Thank you for the interesting presentation. So now, still on the same topic, I would introduce Alin Moldovanov. I don't know whether I pronounce it correctly. Alin is a researcher, professor, and master's vice dean at the Polytechnic University of Bucharest. He was the lead designer and technical coordinator of the Sound of Vision Horizon 2020 project, winner of the 2018 Innovation Radar Award, Best Step for Society. Alin will share with us perspectives on gender and even more intersectionality in his research projects. Well, welcome, and we're looking forward to your presentation.
Thank you, Stefano. Hello, ladies. Hello to the few gentlemen that are here. It seems that we need our workshop on male gender representation in such meetings. It seems it's just a few of us, but yeah. I assume that many of the ladies present here are really interested in these topics and in the opportunities, and it seems like a very successful workshop. Unlike most of the previous speakers, I'm not an expert in these aspects. So I was just invited to share some of my experience from my academic and from my research work. I will try to share my screen. Let's hope it works. Please let me know if it's visible.
Yes, it is.
Okay. So I come from University Polytechnic of Bucharest. As you see, it's a pretty beautiful university with a nice campus. We are a leading technological university and the largest from Southeastern Europe, like 30,000 students and 3,000 academic staff. I'd say we have a pretty good gender balance. Actually, I think it's excellent for engineering, with about 40% of the both students and the academic staff woman. And this actually reflects in everything. We have leaders which are women, like our rector for many years. She was a lady. Our dean for last 8 years. Some of the department chiefs and a lot of our colleagues. And this very good balance reflects also in the research teams. So for me, it was pretty hard to experience firsthand the issues, because our colleagues were always, I'd say, our equals. Of course, there are some specific things for ladies, like the maternal leave or things like this. But I don't know. I coordinate a research team since about 15 years, and we had many researchers join us, and then they had 1 or 2 maternal leaves. This is just normal. I mean, it's normal in our culture here at Polytechnica. So I think we are a pretty good example from this point of view. We always offer them very natural, very simple support, either before leaving or when they came back to integrate into the teams. And I think that once a certain level of gender balance and equality it's reached, the best way to do things, it's in a very natural and stealth way, without overemphasizing everything, and things will go best. I will talk today about two of our researchers. It's nice to know from the beginning that in these researchers, two of the lead developers, in one of them it was male, in the other one it was a woman. So again, this kind of equality that I'm talking about. But I will talk rather about diversity and intersectoriality, as it's called, which means diversity in terms of many other aspects like age, cultural background, technical background, expectations, and whatever variability we can expect in our in people. First project, it's Sound of Vision, a Horizon 2020 project with a very, very ambitious objective. We try to create a device to let the visually impaired people, so blind or almost blind people, to feel what's around them. If they feel and what's around them, then they can move, they can understand, and so on. So this was the objective of the project. There's no time to go into technical details, but I will say that the project involved developing a very challenging technical concept and then testing it with the end users. It was like always a huge challenge because we wanted to do user-centric design. In user-centric design, you always ask the opinion of the user, you put them at the center of the design. On the other hand, it was a technical concept, pretty new, and it was like impossible to explain it to most people, and it took like 1.5 years to build the first prototype. So we had to deal with this difficulty in explaining the concept to the users firsthand. Anyway, we always had input from visually impaired persons, from rehabilitation specialists, from mobility instructors, which are people that teach them how to move into the world using the white cane or dogs or whatever. We used an agile development with frequent small releases, and each small release was tested with visually impaired people, and this allowed us to always get their feedback as soon as possible. And in the end, we had an extensive validation and performance measurement with about 50 visually impaired persons. And among these 50 visually impaired persons, we basically covered everything. We had a good distribution of male-female patients. The age range was from 18 to almost 70, so like 68, I think something like this was the eldest. They had quite different educations, technical skills, and so on. And it's very important to note that we had we noticed a very wide range of expectations in these users, like for instance the young people up to 40 years old. They were more tech savvy, they were used to and very open to technology, so for them it was very easy to accept our system, and they were not scared at all about our system, and this helped a lot in getting used with it and achieving good performance. On the other hand, for elderly people, I'd say most of them were reluctant to try a complex technical system, but so it was difficult to explain it to them, to make them become familiar with the concepts and so on. But with patience and with experience, because we learned things along the way, most of them also accepted it and achieved good performance. After passing these introductory parts of, let's say, having the user accept the system, we noticed that there is not much performance variations based on age. So even for all the elderly people, they were able to achieve good results with very, very few exceptions. We found out that the main aspect impacting performance was I don't know how to put it in words, but let's say how open or how brave the person was to go and try this kind of system, because a lot of people had some kind of reluctance. So this was a very important lesson, that when building an innovative system, and especially if it's technical, complex, and if it's an assistive solution for people with special needs, requirements, we can always expect a lot of variability in people's expectations, abilities, acceptance of the system, and performance in using the system. I included here a few pictures of persons using our system. Please, if you need more information, you can find at these links. soundovision.net is the easiest to remember, probably. I'll also talk about a rather smaller project, one of our national projects, where we created a solution to help people recovery after a stroke, when some of them are left with paralysis. Again, I will not go into technical details, but there are similarities with sound of vision. We had a lot of input, mostly from the specialist, which explained the process and the specific. We tried to discuss with some patients to understand, let's say, their takeoff on this kind of technological system, and then we developed it, the technical development. And in the end, we did some good testing with end users, including a clinical trial. In the clinical trial, we went for a qualitative clinical trial because it was very difficult to even think about a quantitative clinical trial for this kind of prototype level. We had like 20 patients ranging in age maybe from 30-something to 80-something, again with different tech skills and so on. And again, we found out this kind of wide range, first of all, in the acceptance of the system. Younger people were very open to technology. I'd say they were very eager to try this kind of system. There was no effort in explaining and convincing them. And for elderly people, we had to explain carefully, and there was some reluctance to try the system. Again, a wide range of variability in results. Even if most of the results were positive, we had people with about the same clinical condition had quite different end results. So the time is short. I don't want to go into the details of each system. I will just try to draw some brief conclusion. When we talk about innovative products, it's good to always expect and prepare for wide variability in users' characteristics. Of course, gender, but also age, skills, expectations. How you expect them to perceive your system, and this will influence their acceptance and the results that you will get. This is particularly true in high-tech systems and even more in assistive solutions, because the challenge for this kind of systems, they are much higher. So I'd say, in a few words, always take user diversities into account, from concept to product design, refinement, validation, and exploitation. This will certainly improve the amount of people that will be, let's say, will become the customers for innovative product, and it will actually help you understand much better the problem. If we talk about European Commission expectation, research projects, I think, of course, in a research proposal, it's mandatory to consider these aspects and to explain very carefully how we are going to take them into account. Of course, because we are talking about inclusivity and so on. So that was my brief here. As I said, I'm not an expert in this topic, but we had this hands-on experience with people, both researchers. Luckily, we have a very good balance in our teams. And ladies in our teams are the most reliable persons, and you can always count on them. I can't even dream of our team without these ladies. But we had this experience with end users in our projects, and I think it's good to take into account these brief conclusions. Thank you, and if you have any questions.
Thank you, Aline, and thank you also to Sophia, who talked before. Now we will move to the next section of our session, that is gender dimension of research as a factor shaping economy and society and keeping stereotypes in the digital era. Gender biases have shaped and continue to shape society, but how do gender biases in research contribute to maintaining stereotypes and inequalities? What is their impact in shaping society? Our panelists will be telling us about this. And let me introduce Professor Dr. Ipek Ikarakan. Sorry. I hope I pronounced it almost correctly.
Yes.
And she is a professor of economics at the Istanbul Technical University, and she is the elected president of the International Association for Feminist Economics, EAFE, for 2022 and 2023. And she's an associate editor of AIFFE's academic journal named Feminist Economics. But what is feminist economics and what does this mean? So Ipek will tell us about this.
Okay,
Please.
Thank you, Stefano. I'm very intrigued by the various presentations. Thank you for organizing this important event for ELISA on this very important theme. And I've been enjoying the presentations. And I will shift us a little bit towards the direction of social sciences now by looking at why gender as a dimension in research, in economics research, and answering the question that Stefano named, basically, what is feminist economics? I hope you can see my screen. Yes?
Yes, we can.
I'm trying to put it on full. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so let me start out with why and how of integrating gender as a dimension in economics research. And here I would like to sort of spell out the mutual causality between economic patterns on one hand and gendered patterns on the other hand. I think the causality from the economy, from economic events and trends and changes to gendered patterns is more straightforward, is the one that we are more sort of accustomed to hearing. So economic patterns such as and changes in distribution of income and wealth, in access to jobs, to capital, assets, services, the distribution of unpaid and paid work time, all have intersectional dimensions. They're shaped by intersectional dimensions, of which gender throughout the global economy and at all levels of local, national, regional, and international, gender plays an important role as a cross-cutting dimension. And economic changes and policies, therefore, carry within them gender distributive outcomes. So any research, in addition to, of course, other intersectionalities that, the other speakers have pointed out, but I should also mention socioeconomic class as one of those cross-cutting dimensions. So therefore, any research, for instance, looking at the economic impact of a particular policy or a particular exogenous shock, such as the COVID-19 pandemic that we experienced recently, in order to have an accurate assessment, would need to take into gender as a dimension of that varied impact. So the pandemic, for instance, one of the important outcomes from an economics perspective has been on the increasing work time that was put into care work within the household, the increased demand for household production, as all other types of production within the market sphere came to a halt due to lockdown measures and due to breakdowns in supply chains. And so that was a very gendered impact, given that under conventional structures, it is usually women that take more responsibility for care work. So it was a huge increase on demand for women's work time, whereas what time use data, an analysis of time use data shows us that men's work time on the average has decreased under pandemic conditions, whereas women's work time has increased when we include unpaid work as an important form of work. And also this had gendered employment disruptions or gendered employment continuations, because in most of the labor markets, what we see is what we call essential workers, such as in healthcare, in education, and food retail, actually consists of predominantly female workers. The other direction of causality is that the gendered economic patterns, the reverse, the gender gaps in employment, gender segregated employment patterns, gender gaps in income and wealth, caring labor, access to economic opportunities, poverty, etc. These have these also facilitate particular economic outcomes. So it is the causality in the other direction. These gendered economic patterns affect jobs generation, poverty, productivity, sustainability and quality of growth or resilience of economies. And gender-aware economic policy interventions, for instance, benefit not only women, but also all segments of society through promotion of inclusive, sustainable, robust, and resilient economies. So, for example, a fiscal stimulus package in the recovery in the post-COVID-19 in some countries that also allocated an important amount of resources into investing into care services such as childcare, elderly care, disabled care, and healthcare. These are all service sectors with one of the highest, what we call employment multipliers, carries the potential to generate a substantial number of jobs, not only for women, but also for unemployed men, and also has the potential for improving the labor market participation, labor force participation rate overall in the macroeconomy, and facilitating what we call in Keynesian economic jargon, demand or wage-led economic growth. So, but beyond that, integration of gender in economics research is also important for expanding the boundaries of what we mean by the economy, what we mean by the economics, which enables, in fact, a more comprehensive and accurate economic analysis. So that expansion of boundary is occurs not only through taking into account the gender distributive outcomes and impacts, but also integrating that whole area of production of goods and services that we call the care economy into an economic analysis, analytical framework. So, I have, in fact, I should have, I don't know if you can see, I have a pyramid. I don't know why it doesn't show now on the screen. You can
we see the pyramid in the smallest slide, but then we don't see it in big.
Yeah, I don't know why that occurs, but to the extent that, let me enlarge on this. Oh, once I enlarge it, it also goes away. Yeah, okay, well, for the considerations of time, the pyramid actually entails what we call the layers of the economy. And the layers of the economy, at the bottom we have nature, as the largest layer that the whole economic structure sits on, provisioning by nature. In the second layer, we have household production, the non-market, non-monetary layer of household production of goods and services. On the third layer, we have the market economy, the production of commodities, and on the top we have finance. So the general perspective of the economy is one, the conventional perspective is one that takes as a reference only the market production of goods and services and the financial sector. And one of the pioneers of economics research, Alfred Marshall, actually calls economics as the study of men as they live and think and move in the ordinary business of life. So this is a sort of a restrictive, conventional perception of what we mean by the economy, as the main reference point being men, and the main framework as including monetary layers of the market and of finance, and the main innovation being geared around technology and machines. The gender-aware perspective includes the other layers of the larger layers of the household production and nature, which under the COVID-19 lockdown, we've seen is that, these were the resilient parts of the economy that enabled provisioning of welfare. So the economy in that sense includes all living species, provisioning by caring labor, by nature, in addition to provisioning by markets. So this is what I call the complementarities between green and purple economies, the purple economy being a gender egalitarian and caring economy simultaneously. So what is feminist economics? As distinct from maybe using gender economics, it goes beyond using sex as a description of biological attributes, or gender as a description of the social and cultural roles that are associated with those biological attributes. Feminist economics goes beyond using sex and gender as a simple measure for accounting or disaggregation purposes. There's a very good article by a feminist economist, Deborah from 1997, where she talks about using gender in economic analysis as something more than a dummy variable. In econometric statistical jargon, a dummy variable is one of the control elements that you use in describing the formation of a particular outcome. So in that sense, feminist economics is informed by and aware of the diversity of different economic approaches, neoclassical, which is the mainstream conventional approach, in most cases Keynesian, post-Keynesian, Marxist, institutionalist, structuralist, and now we have, since the 1980s, also what we call the feminist economics approach. And the ongoing debates between these different paradigms, theoretical frameworks, and therefore has a critical perspective on conventional economic wisdom. It emphasizes the importance of interdisciplinary approaches, including power relations as an important aspect of analyzing economic outcomes, and also it entertains critical and diverse perspectives on data and methodology, and collection of time use data and data on caring labor, for instance, has been one of the cutting edge frontiers in feminist economics. And it really helps us to deconstruct and redefine what we mean by economy and economics, and what economics research and economics data should entail. So let me finish up with an example. The question of poverty, how to measure poverty. So the conventional gendered approach, so I'm not even talking about the gender blind approach, but the conventional gendered approach, but not necessarily a feminist economics approach, is to disaggregate the conventional poverty rates, whether it's an absolute or a relative poverty rate, by sex, poverty rate of female-headed households versus male-headed households, female poverty rate versus the male poverty rate. A different approach has been that has been informed and developed through a feminist economics perspective, is looking at poverty as a phenomenon of deprivation from minimum standards of well-being. For people who are below a minimum threshold of consumption, but looking at consumption in a more comprehensive manner, because our consumption entails not only market-produced commodities, but also household-produced goods and services, particularly care services and leisure. So for this, therefore, for a minimum standard consumption, we require not only access to monetary income, but also access to time. So feminist economics informed poverty research has therefore been developing different measures of what we call time poverty and combined measures of time and income poverty. One example is the developed by the Levy Economics Institute measure of time and income poverty, which is something that I've been working on applying to different national contexts, such as Turkey, which is where I'm based. And this has actually important implications for policy research, because a poverty alleviation intervention, policy intervention based solely on, for instance, providing non-employed adults in income-poor households with access to jobs is not an effective intervention. If we look at the issue of poverty, also including the issue of time poverty, access to jobs and therefore wage income alleviates income poverty, but simultaneously deepens time poverty. Hence, the net impact on consumption possibilities can be null or even negative. So therefore, an effective intervention at poverty alleviation that also includes household production, consumption of household produced items, and leisure and time poverty should entail a policy intervention expanding not only access to decent jobs, but also access, for instance, to quality care services. So let me stop at that example. And
Thank you, Ipek. And well, I will then introduce our last speaker of today, who is Eva Gengler, who is an information systems PhD candidate at the Friedrich Alexander University in Nuremberg. And in her research, she focuses on artificial intelligence from a feminist perspective. So, Eva, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Really nice to be here, and was really fascinating to listen to the presentations before me. And I also see quite some links to the presentations. So I also look in my area of research with a feminist perspective, so similar to the candidate before me. And I've heard a lot of things going on from economic business, and that there's a male gaze still, and that the male version is still the norm. I've also heard this from biology or medicine. And I think what is here all in those areas is really important, that there's data. And the tools from tomorrow will actually be trained with this data. So I think it makes sense that I'm wrapping up this talk. And I'm talking about feminist artificial intelligence. And as I think everyone has heard this term before, it's a really big buzzword, but I think many people won't be really knowing clearly what it actually is. I want to give a short overview. So what I chose here is machine learning as a tool, as one area or tool from artificial intelligence. And I chose the example of AI in recruiting in order to show you a little bit what this could mean. So artificial intelligence today is not something really intelligent. It's actually usually some big statistical method. So we first would train AI and then we can use it. So the first steps would be that we use input data. So this could be input data from a company that is has gotten applications in the past. So these are CVs, and they have some sort of labels. These labels are done by humans, and this could be something like, this is a good candidate, this is not such a good candidate, something like this. So these are labels that the algorithm should learn from in order to recognize good CVs. And I say good CVs because this, of course, depends very much on the data that is in the input and the labels, which are human. And then we have CVs from the past, which serve as test data. So we can test whether our machine learning algorithm is functioning in the way we would like to. Then we can use it in application, and we can use data from real applicants. So this would be CVs from real applicants, and the AI would produce some recommendations or classifications in order which person to hire. And of course, this makes everything very much more smooth and efficient, but we also see that discrimination is often actually the result of such systems. So very famously, and of course not nice, was the example of Amazon, who actually used exactly such a tool. They have tried to be more efficient, they get a lot of applications, and they tried to go through them using an AI that would then show them the best candidates. What they found out, I think after 2 or 3 years using this, that they actually were systematically discriminating against women. Why did this happen? There were less women in the data set because we don't have many, unfortunately, not so many women in IT. And also because of stereotypical and thoughts of the maybe recruiters and some biases of the people involved in the recruiting process before, the AI was reproducing this kind of thinking. It's statistical only, it's not really thinking. So what does this tell us? It tells us that actually AI is not something bad, but AI is something like a mirror of our society. It shows us what is there, and what we see right now is that we don't live in a perfectly equal world, but there is racism, sexism, but also class differences going on. And if we have them in the data, then we will also reproduce those. And I want very shortly to look on one of my current research projects. I concentrate here on the question, so how can this happen? What do actually companies do to actually not build an AI that would be discriminatory in some sort of way? And that's why my research questions are, how do companies govern the production and use of AI? And also, how do they do this in the regard of gender? And I am looking at this in a sort of case study. This is an embedded multiple case study. And I have chosen some big companies, some German companies that build and use AI. And they, of course, should be somehow similar that I can compare later. In those cases, there's one case per context. This would be one company. And I want to do interviews, and I'm doing this already with, on the one hand, IT personnel, people that build AI, or that work in the AI governance department, if this is already there, and people that actually work in the diversity inclusion area. So because my hypothesis is that both of those departments should be there somewhere. So all those big companies have someone also looking at diversity or looking at gender equality or something like this. And I want to see and understand whether those two perspectives are already talking with each other, and if they're actually aware that there might be a problem with discriminatory AI. But I also want to look at documents, because all of those companies also have frameworks and guidelines that help them govern their processes, and also those are guidelines for people to know how to act. So these are also things I want to look into. And until now, I have seen that some companies are actually quite far progressed. So they actually already have an AI governance, and they actually even include diversity and gender aspects. But also other companies don't do this yet, and also don't see that there might be actually discriminatory behavior going on. So yeah, this is research in progress, and I'm really yeah, looking forward to your questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Eva, and we are also perfectly on time to start our roundtable. So I thank you. I thank all the panelists for being, perfectly on time. And well, I invite all the panelists to the roundtable and also the speakers. I would like to start with some questions to our panelists, and then we will open the floor to also the participants' questions. So I would like to start from Deborah. So I wanted to ask you, how can safety and efficacy of commonly used drugs be investigated for use in, for instance, in pregnant women?
Thank you, Stefano. This is a very complex issue, actually, and I think it's subject of debate currently. So there is no answer right now. The investigation on pregnant women are there from a number of reasons, mostly ethical, of course. No one dares to, let's say, take the chance to do harm on pregnant women. So the data, obviously, it can derive from observation mostly. And I think it will be like this for much longer. I think animal models can probably help. But yeah, I would say that this problem will be actual for many more years. Yeah, I would say that observation and data collection would be helpful in trying to generate further questions in the time ahead.
Thank you very much. And yes, I'll move to questions for Aline and Sophia. So can you further explain your perspective on the relation between intersectionality and research work, especially in terms of developing new technology and, in engineering?
Yeah, it's like, I suppose this question is for me, right? Okay.
Yeah, for both you and Sophia as well.
Sophia, maybe you would like to answer first.
Thank you. I just a short reflection to the question that in our field, I think it's come naturally, and we don't want to let other things influence this. Yeah, I can pass the question to Aline.
Well, it happens like this. Many of the innovative systems are initially designed by engineers, and there are two things that can go not as well as let's say as they should go. First of all, we engineers often forget to talk with specialists. Like, for instance, if we design a system for e-health, very often engineers forget to talk with the doctors, with the people that actually have the most know-how. This is the first issue, and it's not related to our topic today. But the second issue is that typically, and this goes for most of the systems, the designer have a standard user in their mind once they conceive the system, and they forget to actually understand and keep in mind all the way that there is no standard user. There are plenty of users, and there is just, let's say, an approximation in their mind, but they should have this opening to consider the actual users and to investigate the actual users with all their variability, especially in ages, in kids, quite a lot of variability that needs to be considered. Then in technical skills, of course, gender, it's very important in a lot of medical studies, but of course, sociologically and so on. So I think when we design a system, we should, well, not entirely shift from this approach based on the standard user, because this helps us keep things simple in our mind, but at the same time be aware that there is no such standard users and that we should always look at all the types of users. So always take into account what is called diversity, intersectionality, and so on, if we want to reach to real users, which are no standard users, actually. I don't know if I made myself very, very clear, but yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much. So I will also move on to our speakers of the third topic of today's section. First, a question for Ipek. How can economics research contribute towards policy and program interventions towards gender equality in the economic sphere?
Yes, I think that is one of the important contributions of feminist economics, because there's a lot of the research is very much policy oriented research, and the policy implications play an important role in feminist economics writing and disposition of research findings. So let me try to answer this question in the framework of what I call a purple economy, which is a gender egalitarian economic order, the vision for a gender egalitarian, and simultaneously a caring economic order. So this is based on three main interventions. Having a universal social care services infrastructure, which is basically accepting that social infrastructure, which was actually mentioned by one of the previous speakers, I think, accessible and quality healthcare, education and care services for children, for young people, elderly, disabled, and ill, is actually assumed an area for public investments and for as a public economic responsibility, emphasizing that at the same time, the expansion of a social care services infrastructure will also has the potential to generate globally, as our simulations show, millions of purple jobs, care jobs, because this is a very labor-intensive sector, given the organic nature of direct care provisioning. This is a sector that we need to be looking at in terms of future job creation. The second intervention area is labor market regulation for work-life balance and with equal gender incentives, which will enable not only women to reconcile their conventional caretaking roles and their roles in the labor market, but with equal gender incentives to also incentivize and obligate men to participate in more household production in an equal manner, while at the same time attending to their labor market responsibilities. And actually, the question that one of the previous participants brought up, I think it was Angela from Germany, Angela Perez, about the work week needing to be shorter and demands for excess productivity. I thought it was something that very much overlapped with the feminist economic policy plan. Actually, we need to look at it as balancing the need for productivity in paid work in the labor market with productivity in unpaid work within the household. And shortening the work week, there are many economic studies that show shortening of the work week can actually help to increase productivity at the workplace, and at the same time improve gender equality, not only in the workplace, the employment, the labor market, but also improve gender equality in household production, distribution of tasks and time in unpaid work, by giving men also the possibility of putting more time into care responsibilities. And the third area of intervention is an enabling macroeconomic environment, because for the building of for public investments in social care services infrastructure, and also for labor market regulation, for work-life balance and gender equality, we need to have the resources and the macroeconomic fiscal policies, growth objectives such as decent jobs generation, inclusivity, sustainability, and resilience in economies as a macroeconomic goal, rather than this exclusive goal of growth, supporting monetary and industrial policies in order for the purple economy to become an actual reality. And for less developed settings, we should add also time-saving physical infrastructure investments for rural communities where unpaid work and caring labor has different dimensions, rather than just simply provisioning of services to care-dependent household members, but it also includes access to water, energy, transport to support the care activities.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I have one last question for Eva, and then I'll leave the floor to the participants. I see that there are already some hands up. So in your opinion, are virtual assistants, algorithms, and robots currently reproducing inequalities and stereotypes?
I hope it's not super loud in the background. Can you understand me well?
Yes.
Okay, because there's many people around. Okay, yeah, thank you for the question. So I definitely think that current, for example, virtual assistants like Alexa definitely would reproduce gender stereotypes, because here we see a female assistant being always available and doing everything we tell her. I mean, of course, it's not a her, but we would perceive Alexa like a woman. I mean, the name, also the tone of voice would suggest this. I think this definitely does not have good implications for how we see women, because I think this might seem more funny, but I think unconsciously we do connect those seemingly very funny and not really important ways. We do connect them with women, and it's also, I mean, it's not untrue that still we have a lot of assistants which are female, and we kind of see this as normal. So it's kind of normal also that this switched to virtual assistants too. I think this is a problem. And also robots. So I actually have a project also on hypersexualized sex robots. And here we see very clearly how female bodies are hypersexualized, are objectified, and they, again, of course, are always available. And they do the man's bidding. And I think we see here a male gaze. But what I think is actually more important than actually this reproduction in a physical form is that the data is biased. So I think the bigger challenge is actually that the data, as also has been explained in medicine and biology, often does not really show us the data of women. It only shows us data of men. So we actually would forget women. And I think this is the most pressing or urgent matter, as we might perceive computers as objective, and this is just not true. If we learn from biased stereotypical data.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you all. So I ask all participants to, please raise their hands or just write in the chat. So I see Angela Perez has raised her hand.
Yeah.
So please.
Thank you. This is a question for IPEC. Thank you for addressing these topics. I am very curious about two things. First, from the point of view of feminist economics, how does feminist economics reconciliate with the fact that there is in economics in general an ever increasing demand of productivity, of economic growth. You have mentioned it's not to be focused, I mean, the idea in your presentation is not to be focused on growth, but still you mention growth as a goal. And of course, I am a physicist, so I'm considering the boundaries of the planet in this discussion. There is a limitation, a natural physical limitation. So I want to know what feminist economics says on the topic. And the second is, what will be the role for science and industry and innovation in this context? Because I think economics is behind many things, as you mentioned in your presentation. It's really involved in many things that we could normally in science do not take into account, do not consider, and we are not raising debates in our activities, our research, regarding what's an appropriate technology, appropriate science, and up to which limit we can do it, and up to which limit can we push productivity, can we push growth in a sense. And this of course affects what connects to my first question when we talk about gender and our role and how do we understand our careers. So this has everything to do with what is the demand of society, for example, from neoclassical economics in terms of jobs, no? We need jobs, so we need to make more jobs somehow, and we need to increase productivity. Up to when? And if this has anything to do with our quality of life and the way in which we could envision a different kind of scientific activity, which are the goals that we should be discussing? Yeah, something hopefully I could elaborate. I don't know if I'm clear. Thank you.
Shall I go ahead and answer this question, Stefano, or are you collecting questions?
Yes, please answer the question. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Angela. Very important questions. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to clarify, actually, my references to growth and productivity. So the feminist economics position on the question of growth and productivity is one where these two phenomena, which are in conventional macroeconomic frameworks, are objectives, are set as exclusive objectives on their own. In the feminist economics paradigm, they are actually seen as one of the various possible channels to improve well-being, social and economic well-being. And the idea is to also, to show that there are other, ever increasing productivity and ever increasing growth does not necessarily always lead to improved well-being under all circumstances. They can be, that there's a role for them for growth and productivity to improve well-being, depending on which context you're talking about and which groups of talking about. So definitely there are some groups of society with lower incomes, lower current consumptions, which need an increase in a growth in their consumption. But there are many other groups where, whether by nation, by geography, by socioeconomic status, which are over-consuming. And for them, we need to look at possibilities of degrowth, actually. So given the boundaries of the planet, which feminist economics is, there's a huge emphasis on that, we need to be talking about not growth and increasing productivity as the policy objectives, ultimate objectives, but rather looking at how to build, and particularly in the post-pandemic era, how to rebuild for sustainable, inclusive, and resilient economies. And that may entail the tool of growth to some and improving productivity to some degree in some contexts, but not necessarily as the ultimate goal. I think that's the approach that is taken.
Thank you, Rebecca. And I think, I mean, there is a lot of also connection to the green economy in this sense. Well, I would ask if there are any other questions from the participants. Please raise your hand or write in the chat. I don't know whether I missed some question in the chat, whether Isabel has seen any question in the chat.
No, there is no question in the chat.
Okay. Well, in the meantime, while you think about other questions for our speakers, let me ask an additional question to Deborah, basically. Regarding medicine, what organizational changes are needed, in your opinion, to get gender medicine incorporated effectively into the medical school curriculum?
That's another very good question. Thank you, Stefano. I think that the first action would be a change of mindset in governance, meaning that our university programs must include some gender-related, sex-related courses as mandatory part of the formation of new physicians, new generation of physicians and scientists, because still right now we see a sort of resistance in certain circles, in certain environments to, gender-related issues. Although the literature shows that sex and gender are important elements in response to treatments, and even before that in diagnosis, for example, in access to treatments. So it is important to change the mindset of people that are information now. And so I think the recommendations of the WHO, which are being incorporated in national politics, the European Union recommendations are really important in regard to that. So somehow it must come from up and then go down to bottom. So I would say, yeah, definitely a change of the inclusion of certain priorities in the traditional curriculum. Thank you.
Thank you. And do you think this is because of the gender balance of, let's say, medicine professors? I don't know whether there is an issue there or not.
Reading the literature, I think that might be. I think that a more inclusive composition of academic panels would help with solving this issue. I think that it is important to have women in not only in research teams but also in a higher positions, so that they can bring new ideas and a new sensitivity into the governing of these problems. So I think that faculties with more women would help in being more porous, more prone to include these new programs.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stefano.
I also have another question for Sofia. So I wanted to ask you, in your field of research, how common is and how widespread is to really include the gender dimension, the intersectionality into account when designing experiments, when doing, basically when studied this kind of topics? So not only in your work, but I mean in the literature. What is your feeling? What is your...
So what do you mean common?
So I mean, is it, I mean, common practice to take the gender dimension and intersectionality into account when designing experiments in your field, or you think it's very similar?
Okay.
Improvement is needed.
Okay. I think in generally, I would say that the gender equality is very important, but I think it shouldn't be the only focus regarding the dimensions in the design phase. So as far as I see in the literature, the main dimensions which always involved in a study is the anthropometry, and of course it should involve the gender as well. So most of studies stated that the balance or imbalance between the genders, but also the anthropometry is a very crucial point or dimension than a study design.
And I mean, is this being addressed, or do you think there is still, I mean, improvement needed in designing experiments?
It's very hard to answer, I would say, because I don't know how to improve in that sense if the study requires some imbalances in for example, if we investigate some kind of disease, a kind of medical issue which mainly involved in a certain sex, then I cannot see how to improve the equality.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I understand. So, well, you mean you basically need to have, let's say, representative cohorts for specific questions, for specific research questions, so not of the general public. Yes,
exactly. Yes.
Okay, so that I think is very important in the study design.
Yes.
Well, thank you very much. And also, I have a question for Eva. As I see, there are yet no other questions from the participants. In your opinion, what is necessary to remedy the discrimination against women through AI?
Thank you for this question. I think it's really important. But I think a session like this already helps, because I think awareness and actually education is one of the most important steps, that people know there might be problems. AI can also do good, but if we just take data as it is, this might actually be bad. So I think this is a really important first step. Then I think regulation is still also important, because it makes companies aware that they have to do something. And the AI Act of the EU is coming, most probably. I don't know, I'm not super fan of regulation, because I think it's really hard to regulate AI, and I think there need to be a lot of experts involved, that this regulation actually makes sense and doesn't actually create barriers that actually don't really help and technically make no sense. But I think regulation can definitely help as well. And I think it's important also to integrate ethics, human rights, or gender study approaches in the education of information systems people, of business people, and also of informatics or programmers, because I think you just have to be aware that this issue might be there in order to react on this. So I think on many levels, education is important. And one last aspect, but this is also not easy to handle, is that it would help, I think, to have more diversity in teams. And I don't mean only male, female, but also, I don't know, different in many, or diverse in a lot of sense, in an intersectional perspective. I think this would also help to actually create and design products and algorithms that actually also are good for a lot of people. So I think here it's not an easy field. I think this has been tried before, and we still don't have many women or other people in those teams. But I think this is still a really important aspect too. Yeah. Thank you for the question.
Thank you. And I think this last point you mentioned really resonates also with what Aline was telling us during his talk. So that when you have, let's say, a diverse team, then it's also easier and more natural to get designs and products and studies that are more, respectful of gender and of diversity more in general. Well, to wrap up and conclude, before leaving the word to Isabel for the final wrap up, I would just to pick up what Aline said before about not many male names showing up in the participants list. So I was also impressed by how few male sounding names. At least we saw that names are not straightforward to interpret often, but not many male sounding names were present in the participants list. What can we do to have more males participate into these events, in your opinion?
I think, first of all, we should say thanks for inviting us here at this club. I'm just kidding. But yeah, of course, people need to be invited, and they need to know about the goals of these meetings and why it's important to take part. I think it's pretty obvious that from the audience, most of them have a very clear interest, maybe professional interest, maybe research interest in the topic. And indeed, it's surprising that so very few male participants have such interest.
Yeah.
So maybe here is this balance in interest, and it should somehow be addressed. I think the representatives from the European Commission should understand this situation, lack of interest probably.
Yeah, which is sad in my opinion. Anyway,
I must admit that probably we have to work on that, because in the roundtable we had on 11th February, most participants were women. When we asked, when we sent the invitation for speakers, most proposals were women. So yeah, we need to work on attracting more men to these kind of events, including as panelists and and speakers. Yeah, I think Deborah wants to.
Yeah, if I may add something, this is what I meant by a top-down approach. So there is probably an initial phase where it is necessary to somehow call people to action and make people sensitive to some issues. And then the change will come, and it will be obvious for the next generations. But I think there is a phase where you need to be somehow to take positive action on this issue. It's not enough to say, let's talk about this. We need to call people to express their opinion, to take part in the change in a positive way. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I don't know whether anyone wants to say anything else before we close. Then I'll leave the floor to Isabel for the conclusion.
Yeah, thank you very much, Stefano. Thank you very much to all the speakers and panelists. I hope that the workshop helped make this topic clearer, and participants had the chance to learn more about how gender and sex dimensions have to be taken into account, not only sex and gender as we learned, but intersectoriality. And I would like to finish by reminding you all that tomorrow we will have the EELISA Inclusiveness Forum. You are all more than welcome to join the forum. It's online. And To finalize, we will end this session with EELISA's video that we will show right away. Just a sec.
I'd like to say thank you again for inviting us here. I think it was a pretty delightful and eye-opening event for me, at least. As I said, I come from an area where we don't have this kind of issues, but now I understand them and I'll pay a lot of attention in the future. Yeah.
Thank you also on my part. It was really interesting to learn from all the colleagues. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Yeah.
And good luck to all our guests here in their work, in their related work.
Dear Laura, by the time you read this, it will be the year 2030, a year in which all people have equal opportunities, access to food, clean water and energy. We are all healthy and thousands of species on our planet are saved from extinction. That is what some grown-ups say. But today, almost 10 years apart, I wonder how we can accomplish that. My mom says there is a good chance to make it happen. If we all learn how to take the green path to a more sustainable way of living. If we embrace the know-how of experts, students, teachers, and society, and we connect it to real people's needs. If we mix disciplines, people, and ideas, we design technology and combine resources to solve challenges with love and creativity. If people go beyond borders to learn and work in cooperation with others, celebrating diversity and inclusiveness. My mom is a scientist and says
all these transformations have started, and I want to be part of it. That is why I will study to become an engineer in 2030. An ELISA engineer.
So thank you very much to all participants and to our speakers. Again, thank you. I'm very glad to have had you here.
Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Have a nice day.